Please welcome to the stage David Levine of the American Sustainable Business Council. He'll be joined on stage with Robert Levin of Emerging Star Capital. Maggie can come back, and Sandra Kwak of 10 Power. They'll be discussing further innovative finance powering solutions.
All right, well, good morning. It's right. A little good morning. Come on, please. At least I know it's not the kind of spiritual thing, it's a New York thing, and we still say good morning in New York. It's great. Well, good. So we're gonna actually, this is such a tight program, leave it to AREI-AREDAY to make sure that you could take a breath in between, but not by much. So we're gonna get right into it, and we've got 3 different presentations on sort of innovative financing solutions and the like. We're going to continue with Maggie in a bit, and the aim is to just get up a range of ideas, and then I'm going to cap it off with some discussion around sort of moving the policy piece of this as well. And hopefully we even have a little bit of time for dialogue and the like, yeah? So we're going to just start with Sandra Kwak, and please take it away.
Hi, y'all. My name is Sandra Kwak, and I have a company called 10 Power. Can y'all do that with me? Ready? 10 Power. All right. Feels good. Guess what else feels good? Bringing renewable energy to people across the planet who don't have access to electricity today. That's what 10 Power is doing. Our first market is Haiti, where close to 70% of the population has no access to the grid. Think about the role that electricity has played in every single aspect of your life, from your education to your transportation to being here today to the information that we're ingesting to participation in global markets. Without access to electricity, development, human prosperity is severely limited, down to access to clean water, which supports life. In Haiti, 10 Power is working on large-scale commercial and industrial solar projects, and we're bringing together the missing pieces to the marketplace. So there is an ecosystem of solar developers in Haiti. 10 Power works with 100% local installers with a gender empowerment lens. We just launched a women's training program with one of the leading tech universities in Haiti. And we bring the finance to enable these installers to provide solar to large-scale commercial and industrial customers so that they can pay back every single month as opposed to having to have all of the money up front. Because really, who in the US could afford solar if you had to pay 100% up front without any ITC? So we're bringing in the finance, and we're also bringing in the project development, international engineering codes and standards with a capacity building lens so that we're training on every single project to increase the capacity of the people within the community. We are a certified benefit corporation, so we're a for-profit, and my dream is to scale 10 Power all across the world in markets that lack access to electricity today, and use electricity as the first building block. Because once you have electricity, you can bring in purified water, which saves women and girls hours and hours each day from having to walk to pick up water. With the water and electricity, you can provide access to IT, to healthcare, to education, to sustainable goods and services, to information around sustainable and regenerative agriculture. So electricity is really the first building block to be able to provide a new path for development, which is moving us towards regeneration and away from this extractive industrialization that most countries are currently on the trajectory of. So that's 10 Power. I'm Sandra. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Robert.
So, let's see if we can get the slides up. Thank you. Good. So, I'm going to cover just for a few minutes recent investment trends in renewable energy. So globally, the market for renewable energy infrastructure investments in the past year has been about $320 billion, resulting in many millions of new jobs, green jobs, in a variety of subsectors. And this, of course, is increasing capacity for alternatives to fossil fuels. One new innovation financed by the Energy Web Foundation in Europe, based in Zug, Switzerland, has launched in July, just a couple months ago, a platform which is open source. It cost a couple $1 million, but since then they've raised over $30 million through a cryptocurrency to finance software for renewable energy microgrids. So I'll go into that in a little more detail in a minute. There's also a lot of activity in batteries. There's a huge cluster of battery companies between Albany and Manhattan. There's other clusters in Europe and Japan and Southeast Asia. The blockchain is, of course, one of the many platforms that are being explored for renewable energy finance. So renewable energy finance peaked in 2011. It's been in a slow decline since then. Why? Because it hasn't been a very profitable sector compared to alternatives. One thing I wanted to introduce very briefly is a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Thaler, who won a Nobel Prize a couple years ago for his work and contributions to build a bridge between economic and psychological analysis, so behavioral finance, in micro incentives. So this was the second Nobel Prize for behavioral finance. The first one was Daniel Kahneman. And this one, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, I think is the name of his book. And, but this Nobel Prize was for micro incentives. So I encourage all of you to look through your NGOs and for-profit companies and public-private partnerships and do an audit of what kind of incentives are embedded in key relationships and see if you can innovate using all kinds of new platforms, using software for administering these micro-incentives, namely smart contracts, which are part of the blockchain. The private market for impact investing has huge potential. There's a total of $71 billion under management by institutional investors. In April of this year, the International Financial Corp announced a new program, Principles for Impact Management, and they brought together 60 financial institutions. Here's a representative sample. I'm sure you've heard of Calvert Impact Capital. There's many others, but IFC is the original impact investor starting 62 years ago, but of course the name impact investing didn't come into fashion until about 15, 20 years ago. So this impact investing sector is of course investing in renewable energy and creating new jobs. So what I encourage all of you to reach out to the investment impact community if you haven't already. It's, there's a breakthrough energy platform, 30 billionaires put together. There's 4,000 family offices in the US, 10,000 family offices globally, and with about $4 trillion under management of risk capital. We're entering a recession, I believe, in the next 12 months. The yield curve just inverted this past week, causing a big controversy on Capitol Hill. And I think that inevitably we have slowdowns and recessions following every economic expansion. So we're overdue. So raise as much money as you can in the next 12 months is my message. When there's a recovery, I think you're going to see a huge resurgence in the rate of growth of jobs in renewable energy led by solar, bioenergy, particularly biomass, hydropower, wind power, and geothermal. So I'll just skip through to the blockchain. The blockchain, of course, was started in 2008 by either a group of cryptographers using a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto, and he started, as you know, Bitcoin. Since then, there's over 3,500 cryptocurrencies. There was a big mania, just like tulip bulb mania, and it crashed in 2018. But it went up to a total aggregate market cap of $950 billion, of which about 1.4% was renewable energy. So meaning they were using this form of crowdfunding as an alternative to Reg A Plus and Indiegogo and Kickstarter. And it worked until it stopped working because it was too much speculative money that was just looking for it to go to the moon and didn't really have any risk management or sustainable best business practices. So the blockchain survived this bust of the cryptocurrency bubble. And now, thanks to the Energy Web Foundation and their affiliates globally, there's now dozens of decentralized apps that are helping microgrids connect to larger grids and do transparent accounting and reduce friction between players in the micro enterprise generation of renewable electricity. So the smart grids are administered by smart contracts, which are automated contracts in the Ethereum network. This is the Energy Web Foundation uses a derivative brand new blockchain, which is a private blockchain. Duke Energy and other large public companies are part of this Energy Web Foundation. And I think you're going to see the blockchain becoming a very important part of the global information infrastructure, starting with the Energy Web Chain that was launched just a month ago. So with that, I thank you very much, and we'll look forward to an interesting conversation.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Maggie, anything else you wanted to add from your remarks earlier?
Well,
Yeah.
I think actually I want to tie in the role that I'm playing at Prime. If you had someone else from Prime, they would be talking about something different from this. But I am interested in getting money into the right places. And so, Sandra, I mean, you talked about what you were already doing, but I'm curious, what are the inroads? And I think blockchain is another inroad. And so, what I want to help people do is understand how they can participate and how good solutions can get funded.
I have a really exciting announcement to make care of about that.
Yeah? Okay, good.
Do you want to do it now?
I don't know, are y'all ready?
Well, yeah. Look, see? A little bit better than that if she's going to make a real announcement then. Once again, yeah!
Yeah!
All right, go for it.
So this is really exciting because actually 2 years ago at AREI-AREDAY, I announced here at this very conference that 10 Power was going to be putting solar on UNICEF Haiti's headquarters. We've since done that. It's the largest solar installation on any UNICEF in the entire world, and I'm really proud that it's happening in Haiti, one of the world's least developed countries. So just to preface this announcement today, you heard it first at AREI-AREDAY. It's been really difficult as a woman-led social impact startup with an environmental and economic justice focus. Yes, our fifth panelist.
You only have 5 minutes. Stay on time. Go ahead.
It's been really difficult to raise capital, let's be honest. Does anybody know how much VC money goes to women-led startups?
I think it's 0.
It's under 1%. It's well, sometimes it hovers between 1% and 2%, but it's usually around 1%. Does anyone know how much VC capital goes to women of color-led startups?
Sure.
I have 0.
0.02%. And unfortunately, the numbers and impacts are better, but not as good as they need to be, because women of color-led startups are some of the #1 job creators in the United States, and are also tackling some of the largest global problems in terms of climate, energy, and justice. And what I noticed with 10 Power as we were getting started 3 years ago is that there was really a dearth in the marketplace of early stage capital for social impact startups. And to our joy and delight, there has been a proliferation of accelerators and early stage grants. We were fortunate to become an Echoing Green Fellow, which has provided a lot of global support. And so what we've seen in the marketplace is there's been a lot of percolation of early stage support for startups. But what happens as your social impact startup is getting from seed stage to Series A? So we've been really fortunate to raise from high net worth individuals, from early stage impact investors, and now we are at the point at which in Silicon Valley you would call a Series A investment. So we're raising $10 million. We're looking for $2.5 million in risk underwriting capital because we're operating in one of the riskiest markets in the world. According to the World Bank, second most difficult place on the planet to do business is Haiti. So how do we put together this blended stack of capital? And there are not that many examples out there in the world of social impact startups that have gotten past this Series A. In tech, we talk about the valley of death, right? For social impact startups, I think the valley of death right now is getting that Series A capital because there are no VC firms out there that are like, all right, sign me up for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I am very thrilled to announce here at AREDAY that we are launching a renewable energy access donor advised fund. We are partnering with Impact Assets, and this is not just a donor-advised fund for 10 Power. This is a renewable energy access fund that will support other initiatives such as Navajo Energy, that will support initiatives such as off-grid alternatives, and we are looking to open source the term sheet. Similar, does anybody know Y Combinator's SAFE agreements? It's an early stage convertible notes agreement that the accelerator, San Francisco-based accelerator, Y Combinator, published on their website. And they said, any seed stage company, just come to our website and use this because it reduces the friction. It takes out all of the unnecessary terms for an early stage startup to get access to convertible notes capital. And so by open sourcing that term sheet, they opened up an entire marketplace for early stage tech companies. So what we want to do with this DAF is open source the term sheet so that any enterprise, any social impact enterprise that's at our stage looking for Series A capital can approach any philanthropist or foundation and say, hey, let's launch a donor advised fund. We can unlock a lot of charitable capital that's just sitting right now, usually invested in traditional capital markets. So people got a tax write-off for this money, but then it's just sitting in Schwab or Vanguard, and the philanthropy or the foundation is actually just investing it in the regular capital markets that are creating many of the same problems that they're trying to fix with the 1% of interest. So we're unlocking all of this capital, hoping to move it into these enterprises which are really going to move the needle. And we're looking to make a press release over the next couple of months. So the fund is just getting up and running. We're super grateful to Impact Assets for housing the DAF. And to our first investors, and we welcome any other investors who are interested in the DAF. And I'm happy to talk more about it because I don't want to take up too much time right now. But thank you.
Great. Great. So did you want to add anything to that at the moment?
Just that
Yeah.
it's great to hear that. I think working with DAFs is an untapped issue that, like you said, they're just sitting there. There's no requirement for the investments actually to come out of them the way there is at a foundation. So we also work with Impact Assets. If you all don't know them, it's a good model to look at. And so I'm excited for your news.
Thanks. So one thing I just learned is that if people do have a DAF at Schwab or Vanguard or any other institution, they can actually transfer it over to Impact Assets. And we're also hoping to launch similar mechanisms with other institutions like RSF and Tides Foundation.
Great. All right. So we're going to transition a bit in terms of, from the role that we see for business and investors at the American Sustainable Business Council, is one that sort of understood that there's incredible market drivers that have been moving stuff. But at the same time, there hasn't been the kind of shift at the level that we want, the scale that we want to see. And part of that formula was to say, back about 10 years ago, that there was an opportunity to take businesses, investors, business organizations that were operating beyond the short-term profit at all cost paradigm and use them as a voice of advocacy, to aggregate them together and build a greater voice and power in order to influence change, right? Change the narrative, but also to be out there and saying, not only are we doing good work internally, but we have a collective power to actually influence public policy and the like. So as we've been building it out, right, we've been building it at the national level, aggregating all these trade associations, like a Sustainable Furnishings Council, the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers, et cetera, right? All these place-based organizations, from local first organizations, Main Street organizations, independent business organizations, and the like, and building up state-based business organizations. So there's a North Carolina Business Council, the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, West Virginia, right? Michigan, Wisconsin Sustainable Business Councils that are now using the great work that many of you are doing, right, in the investment community and the business community to actually advocate for larger public policy change, both at the local, state, and at the federal level as well. So the strategy was to sort of complement. We can't move the policy unless we have the story. Wow, it was powerful, all right. Look at that.
Breaking down silos.
That's right.
I blame the rapidly accelerating effects of climate change.
Right, and greenwashers. How long did it take you to aggregate all these companies?
So the way it started is, so B-Lab, Green America, Social Venture Network at the time, which is now Social Venture Circle, right? All those groups is how we started. So by day 2, we were already, at that point in time, representing about 8,000 businesses, right? So the idea was to get to scale, right? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right? Part of the reason for this work, right, was to counter the powers that be, right? The lobbyists, the others represented by the U.S. Chamber, represented by the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Chemistry Council, the American Petroleum Institute, and the like, and have a counter-business voice, right? So when we were arguing, right, the conversation about Keystone Pipeline was taking place, you would have a voice, right? The American Petroleum, the U.S. Chamber would be saying, you know, without Keystone Pipeline, we won't be able to create jobs, it'll kill the economy, right? The Washington Post and others covered the story at the time and said, the American Petroleum Institute, the U.S. Chamber says this, but the American Sustainable Business Council and its over 200,000 businesses that it represents says that there are more jobs in renewables. There's a better pathway forward and the like. So the idea is a counter-narrative, but also a forward narrative in the sense of that we're able to provide the solutions, right? So one of the pieces that's just got reintroduced again, right, is clean energy victory bonds. So thinking about the war bonds, yes, from World War II and the like, same kind of concept, just introduced by Senator Udall and Matsui and Lofgren, right? So it's allow for small investments, right, $25 or more for the American public to invest in here, right? Immediately, the calculations, you know, $50 billion. And the idea is it would move into clean energy. So totally directed in that sense. So this is something that one of our founding members, Green America, right, and the American Sustainable Business Council are now working to push forward again, thinking that maybe this is another moment. 3 years, 4 years now, we've been pushing it forward, hasn't gotten the traction that we want. Maybe this is a path forward, right? Opportunity here as well. So that's a bill that we're going to be pushing forward, particularly in the fall now as well. You know, the carbon pricing bills is starting to emerge. We've been working at ASBC on carbon pricing bills at the state level and in the national level, right? It's been a difficult battle. We just lost in Oregon again, right? You know, any number of different ways of moving it forward. There's bills in Massachusetts. There's been bills in Connecticut, in Vermont. Very difficult to move, but what we're hoping is that the momentum at the state level is going to be able to drive that work. But the key for us is that whenever we do this policy work, and if we look back to the cap and trade failure, right, is the question is what are the principles that we're actually operating with in order to make these decisions about which bills to support. So you see, there's 5 bills that are already introduced. There's several more bills that are coming. But there's a difference, right? The difference between a cap and trade bill and a carbon tax bill. The difference between a revenue neutral bill and a revenue positive bill that's actually putting the money back into clean energy, to safer chemicals, water infrastructure, reach across sectors. That's a reinvestment that'll help us draw down, right? Then there are a number of bills, including ones that are getting, you know, more support than others at the moment, that include regulatory rollbacks. So telling the EPA can no longer regulate here, there, and everywhere. So the question is, as these bills emerge, you know, you're hearing, you know, great resonance with the idea that we have to put a price on carbon, but the question is, at what price do we put a price on carbon? You know, what's going to guide these decisions that we make? You know, are we going to allow the regulations to be totally rolled back? Are we going to say that it's not going to take care of the environmental justice needs in our communities across the country? You know, what are we going to direct this towards or not as we make these decisions? So the key is at the moment we're trying to mobilize business leaders, you know, with a number of different organizations just showed up in Capitol Hill, continue to do the pushing, you know, and the like. So it's catching on, and the question is now, it's been generic. We'll keep pushing the principles on this like getting upstream on this, no exceptions on this, putting a fair price on carbon. So these kinds of principles, what we're asking is that folks start to think about that before we start to cut the deals, right, that end up with the kind of bills that don't do what we need them to do. As we move through it, there was some, this from the Green New Deal to the Millions of Jobs campaign that was a precursor to the Green New Deal and the like, to another set of efforts. What we know is, right, Green New Deal, attracted a great deal of attention and still does, but the question is now, the next step is what are the policies, the specific policies that could be introduced that will actually drive the change that we want. We're not about to see one omnibus bill that's going to actually cover everything at the moment. So there's efforts to look at water, infrastructure, transportation, energy, work about tying the relationship between the petroleum, right, over to the chemical industry. So the growth rate of the use of fossil fuels is off the charts when you look at chemical industry, the plastics and the like. So if we're going to look at this in a more holistic way, to move beyond just the energy sector to all the sectors. So great opportunity to start to drive this, drive this forward. And there's any number, Demand is here, and the new consensus group and the work that they're trying to do to try and coalesce a bunch of groups. We're trying to link farmers and ranchers with the larger business community. There's a bunch of innovative work that's taking place, but look forward to seeing a number of bills introduced at the national and state level to try to address this in a number of different ways. The other opportunity, clearly, right, that's a bit less controversial in a bunch of forms to be able to drive this is procurement bills, right? Can be moved at the local, could be moved at the county, could be moved at the state level. It's not moving quickly at the federal level at the moment again, but we have opportunities to actually move purchasing and think about, right, the carbon emissions of every kind of product that we actually have, right? So great opportunity, and again, usually a transpartisan effort that's able to move procurement because it's driving local economies, it's building up the economy in the states, and it's an enabler of many different ways. So the other piece, again, that is touched on by Chip, earlier, it's going to get touched on again, is the importance of divestment, right? And then on the flip side of it, the complementary side, the reinvestment part of it, right? Let's not pretend, whether, Chip said not enough money has been moved into reinvestment at the moment, but the question is that divestment has, and the work to sort of drive that at the state, at the, and at larger, at the institutional level, at the foundation, that the internal policies that have been developed by foundations, by other institutions, by the attempt to move governments like New York State, New York City, that we participated in, is raising the conversation, is putting pressure in order to drive others to understand that the private sector and the like, and those investments are going to be a great opportunity as well, right? Having this on the radar screen, having this and having the pressure on is a part of this, right? So there's a carrot, there's a stick, there's these opportunities, but from our vantage point, it's sort of multiple strategies that get us to the place of being able to impact change and the like. So just wanted to add that to the conversation here as a way of sort of saying, as we move the market stuff, as we move the investments, we have to step up and increase our political power. We can't just expect, right, the undermining that's taking place right now at the federal level, right? The way it's playing out internationally and like, if we don't align this work together and grab our voice, to grab our power, it's going to be way too difficult to get the change we need at the scale we need in the time frame that we need. So we'll just open this back up again for a little dialogue. So thank you. And we'll open this up for a little bit of dialogue about, and then open it up to everyone else. Where do you see what's missing to drive this at the scale? You talked about a new opening that you have in what you have. What else is missing? What could we be doing collectively in order to drive the change at a larger scale?
I think it's amazing what you're doing in bringing a lot of various stakeholders together and looking at things from an economic systems perspective. Because a lot of the conversation right now, there was a cartoon. It was like in the 1980s, it was like save the environment, don't litter. And in the 1990s, it was like, oh, everybody recycle, we're going to save the environment. And now it's 2019, and we're like, okay, completely reframe capitalist economics into an ecologically sound economic system, and we can save the environment. So the challenges are getting much larger and much more real, and it's so important that we all work together. I'm part of the American Chamber of Commerce in Haiti. There's no Sustainable Business Alliance, but listening to you speak now, I want to start one. We're also part of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and seeing the way that the various organizations that come together can make policy recommendations. I actually gave a presentation 2 years ago on removing the tariff for solar panels in Haiti, and that passed last year. So the tariff went from 27% to 0% for importing solar panels to Haiti. And it's group effort, team effort, right? And it's really important that we all band together to create new economic models. So what we're trying to do in our own little way with launching this open source donor advised fund, figuring out new ways to create blended capital stacks, because this financing needs to come from creative mechanisms. Yeah. The financing systems that we have right now are not working for anyone, because if everyone is under sea level rise, if we are increasing natural disasters, if we are killing all of the species biodiversity on this planet, there's not going to be any capital markets in the future. So it's really important that we be investing our time and energy and capital into new models that are working for 100% of life on planet Earth.
Great. Robert, you wanted it, and then we'll...
Yeah, so I think your presentation was terrific, and so was yours, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the audience, because I'd like to know what kinds of citizen engagement programs are innovative that can scale whatever you're doing. And I think social media is obviously been tapped, but it's diluted a lot of people's attention and fragmented our attention. The actual political powers right now is in the lobbyists. The Nature Conservancy is among over 35, 40 environmental organizations lobbying on Capitol Hill. The budget in the aggregate, according to Open Secrets, last year was about $26 million, led by the Nature Conservancy, and they've been lobbying on all of these environmental initiatives. But the fossil fuel lobby is 5 times bigger in their lobbying efforts, at least. And so we need to support these environmental organizations and help them raise money for their PACs. Until some time in the future that we have a Supreme Court reversal of Citizens United, we're going to have super PACs supporting people who oppose progress in sustainable development. So we need a sea change. We need, obviously, during the next election cycle, more environmental initiatives being discussed at town halls. So I encourage all of you to be actively pursuing citizen engagement to support these organizations.
Great.
I think it was interesting for me to also think through how I'm seeing corporations, and maybe as a microcosm in terms of the field that we're talking about. They're getting demand from their consumers to be more responsible, so there's a whole CSR movement. Some of the corporations that have participated in Prime are doing so from their corporate side, not their foundation side, so I think that's very interesting, and they obviously see value in that. They see it as a business line, so they're aligning what the innovation they want to feed with the work that they're doing already in the market, and they're seeing connections there about having a sustainable world in the future. And so your slide with all the corporations made me also think, so there's just the different levers that we're pulling, but it's nice to see how we can make a business case about this, and then in terms of how they contribute capital, they have a lot of different inputs that they can put in different ways. So I think that's kind of a new growing trend that goes alongside the policy and the individual contributions as well.
Great. Let's take some opening up. Yeah, 1 and 2. Yeah, please. Yeah, and just you can introduce. Yeah, and you introduce yourself as you get up as well.
Hi, my name is Daya Punte. I'm not in the industry of finance or media, but I have been thinking in terms of engaging citizens, I feel like we need a massive, like news media, essentially, for the people. Something that's really engaging, full of youth life, and really giving everybody the truth about what's going on instead of being influenced by all this corporate dogma of the denialism. So I would love to see that happen. I don't know how it can happen, but I feel like it's very possible and would help hugely, because right now I see a lot of the scientists are bringing a lot, but at the same time their communication style is, it's limiting in how to really activate people. And the advocates are doing an amazing job, but at the same time, we need to broaden that to everybody and just light that fire. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to Aria. Aria, are you in here? She's working behind the scenes, but she's a media producer. She's a photographer, videographer, and you'll see her. She has blonde hair. She's running around with a clipboard usually, but she's launching a green news network right now, and it was going to start out as a TV show, and people kept pressuring her to turn it into a network because there's so much need for this.
Great. Next up, yeah, please. There's a mic behind you.
My name's Tim Worth. I'm with the UN Foundation now. I was many years on the Hill working on these issues. And I think that was a very interesting panel. I get up to reflect on a couple of things. I think there's some history of all of this that's enormously useful. One is to reflect back on the last time there was an important pricing bill that almost became law, which was Waxman-Markey. And why did that fail? That failed because it was perceived by many not as a cap-and-trade bill, but as a cap-and-tax bill, because the funds coming out of the trading system was going to all kinds of other purposes, and as a result, it was perceived by many, even though those purposes were great, as a cap-and-tax bill. And that eventually took it down. And I think we have to be very careful in whatever kind of pricing mechanism gets put together not to repeat that mistake. Second, we have to be very careful as well that many of the industry supporters of a pricing mechanism are extremely eager to use this as a way of really gutting the Clean Air Act. And the Clean Air Act is probably the most important piece of legislation ever written. It reaches to just about everything. It's a remarkable document. And we have to be very careful that it sounds good if you say it fast enough. Oh, we'll be for pricing if you deregulate. Well, we have to be very careful about that, it seems to me there. That's a second point. Third, you have a whole variety, a whole menu of things up here. I don't think anything will happen without focus. You're going to have to make a decision, and the community is going to have to make a decision on pricing as to what kind of a focus, what kind of a strategy you want to focus on. It can't be a whole lot of different things. It's got to be a very tight focus to get anywhere and to be able to build the sort of coalition that's going to be necessary. I think it's out there. I think it's out there to do, has to be put together, but it seems to me that the taxing proposal and a fee proposal that has been talked about, is the way to go, but that has to get everybody pretty close to being on the same page or nothing's going to happen. So that's my view. I think there's loads of capital out there to be joined this. I don't agree that there isn't capital there. I think there's lots and lots of capital out there, and that can be sprung with the right kind of regulatory and legislative signals. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Great. One could expand. It would be a very long conversation about what happened with Waxman-Markey and the like, about what the other causal factors were and the like. That's a fuller conversation. But again, I just offer up, what's going to guide the decisions we have? What are the basic principles about what we're looking for in any particular bill? and how do we drive that? Great work, Hank, the great work in moving 100% renewables, 8, 9 states, moving this. That's another driver for greater investment, right? Another piece of policy that's out there at the moment, but based on a set of principles, no compromise, 100%. Let's move it. That's it. You go in for the gold. So again, the compromises, and I facilitated a dialogue, way back when between, the environmental groups pushing carbon, so the cap and trade and the carbon tax folks and the like. And one of the things that speaks directly to what you said is they hadn't had a conversation. They were debating everything. They never sat down and said, could we come to a principled agreement before we go in there and negotiate, before we go in and make these decisions and the like. So it's instructive that if we're going to actually, whether it's political power, financing and the like, if we start to actually move a little bit beyond ego, our own organizations, our own frames, and actually look towards greater collective, collaborative solutions as well. We have about 5 more minutes. We have a few more. We have 1, 2, 3. Yes, please. Mike coming your way, right behind you.
Thank you. I'm delighted always to have the honor of Senator Wirth in the room and his amazing advice with the UN Foundation. I'm just wondering, with the federal climate for creating bonds not being very realistic right now, what about state and city, local project kind of bond financing? Would that be a little more innovative to kind of trump our way into that higher level of federal bonds eventually, the victory bond strategy?
So I think there are other, does anyone want to? All I could say is from our end, and other folks in the finance world could probably speak better, is that most every green bond that's been put forward is sold out and beyond, right? So there's a hunger for that, right, out there as well. But does anyone want to speak to that as well? No? Okay. Well, more to come. Yeah. All right, next up. Yeah, please.
Hey, my name is Jonah Kerman-Faber. I'm a research associate at Climate Exchange. We work solely on state-level carbon pricing campaigns. And I want to clarify that we're actually policy neutral in terms of what kind of carbon pricing we support or help research, but we also have states that have failed attempts because their carbon pricing bills fail to inspire. They fail to, tap into other dire needs of these states: transportation crises, housing crises, public health inequality. Right now in the Transportation Climate Initiative in the East Coast, we're getting huge pushback from EJ groups because they're skeptical of market-based mechanisms. There's no proof that system is going to address these drastic public health inequalities that currently exist in their neighborhoods. And not to say that carbon tax and dividends is not a bad way forward, but that it takes a really important calculus of what base exists in your jurisdiction, what they're going to respond to, and we would like to kind of help states move through that. In terms of finance, I think that's a really, really important thing to talk about as it relates to carbon pricing, and perhaps the role of public capital and how that can leverage additional private funds. Could one or more, this is for the whole panel, but could you speak on, in your work, how you relate to public capital, how you see it, what role you see it playing, and if there's a role for carbon pricing to interact with the way the finance world works for you guys?
So Scott Stringer of New York City is the comptroller of the New York City, in charge of 5 pension funds, over $600 billion. And he has a green ethos. He's interested in infrastructure development, which will increase from 3% to 6%. So there's incremental changes happening in municipal finance nationwide. I don't track it very closely, but I'm very well aware of New York City needing to implement Mayor Bloomberg's 20-year plan to increase sustainability, because as you remember, during the last hurricane, even though it degraded to a lower intensity, we still had flooding of the World Trade Center site. And so that we need to reinforce barriers and increase the city's survivability. So I think municipal finance for not only infrastructure, transportation, green jobs, but also to increase sustainability of wetlands surrounding cities is very important too.
We have 30 seconds. Last words. Yeah, we'll go here.
Well,
You have first
I
words.
have something to say on that, even though innovation isn't really a state-level priority, but we've gotten funding for interns and research-specific projects at the state level, and that's been very helpful to us in the non-public area.
Last word.
I think we need more innovation in finance, and people in this room are brilliant, and they need to be involved with civic engagement in a very innovative way, using the internet and using Web 2.0 and 3.0.
Come find me and let's talk about innovation in finance. 100% renewables for 100% of humanity by 2050.
Thank you. Very exciting.
Thank you
Great
all.
speaking style.
Hey, thank